If you're learning Unreal Engine 5 and want to learn how to destroy objects, then this video is for you. We're going to take a look at Chaos, the destruction system that comes with Unreal 5. And you will learn how to cut your meshes using several cutting methods to have control over the look of your simulation. Then we will take a look at some of the Chaos properties so you can increase the quality of your destruction. And then we're going to take a look at the field system so you can learn how to trigger the destructions when you want. And then we're going to use Niagara to automatically spawn visual effects when using your Chaos destruction. And finally, we will cover how to use gameplay with Chaos to destroy elements using other blueprints like a bullet. Oh, and by the way, make sure you check our store. We have a lot of cool stuff, like a free course to learn blueprints, modeling a castle in Unreal Engine, and of course a lot of Unreal Marketplace packages made with a lot of effort. So let's continue. So to start working with the Chaos in Unreal Engine 5, we just need to open the editor, and you will see that I have a new tab here called Activate Fracture Editing Mode. You can click on this or click on Shift 5, and here you will see a new panel window. In the left, you will have different properties that will enable you to modify and adjust how you want your fracture to look like in your mesh. And in the right, you will have some properties that you can change. For example, I could click on the uniform fracture, and you will have some properties here that are unique to this feature that I can modify here. Basically, this will be the panel that we will use to fracture our meshes in Unreal Engine 5. So the first thing we need to do is to create a mesh that we can destroy. So let's do that next. So in order to apply Chaos destruction to our mesh, first we need to create a mesh. So let's go to our Create tab, go to Shapes, click on the cube, and just drag it into the world. And I can just put it here for now. If I hit play, by default, the cube won't do anything. So I need to fracture this. So to cut this cube, I just need to click on this fracture. And you will see that I have a new tab called Generate Asset. Basically, the way Chaos works is that you will have your static mesh asset, and you will have your fracture asset here that can be break into these parts. So this is the static mesh, and this is the Chaos asset. By default, this is the static mesh. And Chaos doesn't really modify the original one, so you need to make sure the static mesh here has a new asset. And this is what we're gonna do now. We're gonna click on New, and here we can change where we want to save our new destruction asset. So let's go to our Mastering Chaos, and let's go to our Geometry Collections, and we will call it my new cube collection, something like that. Then just click here, and you will see that I have my cube here. So if you want to change the material, this is a bug that can happen very often. Just click on a new level, then open recent levels, and you will see that I have my cluster material. But if I go to my fracture mode, you will see that it's white as usual. So this asset now is not a static mesh, it's a destroyable mesh. So if I hit play, you will see that I have some physics here. Let me move my player a little bit here. Just like that. So just hit play, and you will see that my cube falls. Now, this is the most basic function that Chaos have. It just adds physics to the asset. But what you can do with this, if I open my fracture mode, you will see that I have this section, the fracture section. Okay, we will take a look at the rest of the sections little by little, but first let's take a look at the fracture one. So if I click on the uniform one, and then click here, you will see that I'm cutting my mesh into several pieces here. Let's take a look at some of the properties that you can have with the functions. For example, you can change the random seed to have some randomness in your destruction. If you don't want the way it's cut, then you can change the way the boronoid is affecting your mesh. Okay. First, you can change the chance to fracture too. This will generate more variations. And one of the most important things for me is the amplitude. Of course, more amplitude will change the noise. And of course, the frequency, like if you put like 1 or 2, basically it will be more noisy. Okay, let's go back this to the defaults. And here you can choose the maximum boronoid pieces. For example, I can choose like 50 pieces and minimum 20. And I can randomize between the two to have different results if I want. Once I'm happy with the fracture I have, let's get this back to 20. Once we click fracture, our mesh is ready to simulate. Now, there are a couple of things here that you can use. If you hold Shift and press E, you will be able to explode your mesh. And you can see that you have your fracture mode here. Okay, let's go back to Shift 1 and then this mode again. Okay, Shift 1 and Shift 5 to open the fracture mode. Okay, now you can choose the fracture level and you can explode it by using this slider. The slider is in all the properties, so you can take a look at how your mesh will actually break. Okay, so if I press Control and sorry, let's just move the fracture, and you can see I have different levels. The level 0 is of course the root of my asset, and the level 1 will be my first level of fracture. Okay, so let's take a look of how this works. Okay, let's hit play, and you will see that my mesh is breaking into different pieces, and now my fracture is working. It's not exactly pretty, but you know, it's working. So the way the cluster works, it's in a hierarchy mode. For example, I can have this hierarchy here, which is my level 0, and I can break it, let's say, into 3 parts. Some parts like this, and this is my hierarchy level 1, and I can even break it even more. For example, I can break these pieces into 3 more pieces. This one I can break into 2 more pieces, and this one I could leave it like that, and this will be my hierarchy level 2. So as I increase the hierarchy of my destruction, you will see that I increase the number of chunks I have. So what I want to do is to, let's say, increase the hierarchy of this. Right now we have 2, level 0 and level 1. What I want to do is to check all levels, and I will check 1, or maybe I can click just these 2 by holding Shift here. I can select these ones. Okay, we will take a look at the selection modes later, but for now let's just pretend we want to cluster this. Well, very simple. Just go to uniform, and the ones we select, we're going to fracture. Okay, so let's go back here. You can see that as I increase these 2, you will see that I can fracture these 2 pieces. So let's say I just want to fracture piece 9 and piece 10. So I will create fracture, and now I have another hierarchy. My piece 9 has more pieces here, smaller ones, and my piece 10 has more pieces. The rest of them don't really change. So let's take a look. By holding Shift E, you can explode your mesh just like this, and you will see that I now have two different levels. If I check level 0, you will see that nothing has changed really. Then I change to level 1. You will see that I have my explode amount here. I have my pieces. And now if I check level 2, you will see that I have these pieces here that are fracturing. It's just, the smaller ones. Okay, so this is how the hierarchy works. And of course you can click all and you will have the small pieces. And of course you can change the fracture level by holding Shift and S or Shift W. Shift W to go up. And you can see that here, when I check all of them, you will see I have some smaller pieces here. But if I change the level 1, you will see that this piece here is intact. But if I check all levels, this piece has been broken into several pieces. So this is how the hierarchies works. So let's play, and you will see that I have some smaller pieces in this area, like here, and the rest ones are very big. So what this means for us is that the quality of our destruction will actually depend on how we cut the mesh. For example, you can have big pieces, you can have some medium pieces, and you can have some small pieces. If you are working on games, maybe the smaller pieces may take a lot of memory, and those will be created by Niagara systems to simulate the very small pieces, usually. But it's a good rule to keep in mind that in order to have a nice destruction, you will have a collection of big elements and small elements. And the combination of these two and how you decide to cut them will determine the quality of your destruction at the end. Now that we know how to fracture our mesh, let's take a look at the most important shortcuts that you will use often when you're doing your fracturing using Chaos. So, the most important ones are the fracture level and the explode amount and the color. Okay, so if I hold Shift E, you will increase the fracture, just like this. And if I hold Shift Q, you will be able to reduce the size. Of course, you can always use the parameters, but to be honest, it's very useful to use the hotkeys too. So the next one is the fracture level. If I hold Shift E, I will be able to explode it. And if I hold Shift S, I can go back to the roots, or I can move the levels. I can also use Shift W to go in the opposite direction. And the next one is Shift B with capital B, like a big B. So if I click Shift B, you will be able to check the colors, and let's increase the fracture level. Shift B, you will be able to see the pieces into different clusters. So with the colors, you will be able to identify them a little bit better. But if you don't really want to see them, just hold Shift B and you will be able to see the original material. So if you hit play, don't worry, it will show the original one. This is only for preview purposes. And of course, like if you are exploding the mesh, let me hit play and pause very quickly. It really doesn't matter. When you play, the mesh will start intact. Let's see if we can see it here. Play, you will see the cube starts without the explode amount. So it's only when you want to preview the mesh. If you go out of this mode, you will still see it, but if you play it, you won't see it. So these ones are the most important shortcuts that we will use very often. So Shift E or and Q to explode the amount, Shift B to change the colors, and Shift W and Shift S to take a look at different fracture levels. Now let's take a look at the selection modes we have here. So in order to have more control over your destruction, you may want to select one piece and do some operations here. So we have a bunch of options to do that. The first one, of course, is to click here. When the material changes something like yellow, this piece will be selected. And of course, you can control click and control again to deselect or select another one. And you can keep selecting the pieces you want. Of course, you can do something like this, where you can reduce the explode amount with Shift Q and Shift E, and you can click. If I don't hold Control, I will lose the selection. But there are other ways to select your pieces. Sometimes you want more specific one. For example, you want to select all of them, you just click All. And this will select all your pieces in all the hierarchies. Or you can select None, and it will deselect all the pieces you have selected. The next one is the contact. For example, I have some pieces here in my hierarchy, are very close to each other. So if I click contact, you will be able to select the pieces that are touching the same one. Okay. The next one is the siblings. For example, I can choose this one, and I can choose the siblings. Basically, I will choose all the same ones that are in the same hierarchy, basically choosing level 1 or level 2. And the same thing with the cluster. I choose this one, and you will see that I'm choosing all the ones that are in the same cluster that have the same parent. That in this case is 18. So if I choose this one and then choose the cluster, I will choose all of them. I can also click here and then shift click to select all of them. And I can control click here and control again to deselect, or shift to select multiple clusters. The other thing I can do is to invert my selection. And this is how you select stuff. For example, if I wanted another level of destruction, I can go here and then select the cluster, and then go to uniform, and then just break it again. Let's just say something like 5 by 5, and then fracture. And now you will see that my piece that was 18 is now divided into 5 parts: 24, 25, 26, 28, and 29. And all these parts have inside 3 more stuff. So if I check, now I have level 3. Now if I want to select this one, I can also fracture this, and I will create more detail for this part. This is how you control which areas you want. Let's say I want this piece to be big and this piece to be smaller chunks. And maybe this one I can move them, and I can combine them if I want. We'll take a look at those. And basically, this is the select function. Now we're going to take a look at the fracture modes. By its default, you have the uniform Voronoi fracture. So we're going to start with this. The Voronoi fracture is the most common way to fracture an object. It's usually for rigid bodies that will break like this. But not every fracture looks like Voronoi. So let's take a look at what you can do with uniform. So first off, we need to take a look at what we can do. So first we need to click here to visualize the fracture. If you don't click it, you won't see the cuts. So once you do that, you will see how the fracture will look like. You can also draw the sides, which is basically like a point for the area for each cluster. And sometimes I like it to keep it to have an idea of where the points are. But basically, you have some options here. The grout space is the amount of space between pieces. For example, you increase the amount of space and you will basically, the pieces will have more distance. And then the noise have the amplitude and the frequency and the octave number. Of course, this one will increase the quality of your Boronoid, and the amplitude will check like how big the pieces are, and the frequency will repeat it over and over again. So if I have a very high frequency, maybe I will have like very small pieces. Okay, but usually we're constrained by the uniform Boronoid minimum and maximum. So in order to see this better, we're gonna put like 50 and 50, and you will see that I have like 50 points that I want to destroy. I can also put 1, and you will see that I only cut my mesh in 1 piece, which is very dumb. I can cut in 2. I mean the minimum 2. Let's just not touch the maximum. Then when I put 2, you will have 2 pieces here, and 3, and 4, and so on. Okay? So if you want to randomize a little bit, you can put something like 35, the maximum, and 15, the minimum. Okay? And this is where you can have some kind of big pieces or small pieces. The other one is the point spacing. Let's just say like 500 or 5000, something like that. This is constrained, but basically the shorter your point spacing, then the spacing between the collision will be much smaller. For example, between these two areas here, between this one and this one, there should be enough space. So it's better to keep it at 50 for now. So with all these combinations, and also with the random seed, you have enough, you know, variations to play around and create your own Boronoid. So let's take a look at the fracture now. Once you fracture, you will realize that I have my explode amount, right? And I also have my Shift B to visualize my original material. Like, I can just go on and use different fractures, but in this case I will use the uniform one. For example, I can select this one, and this time I can cut it by 2 if I want, something like this, and I can change this, can change the random seed to have something like this, and then I can do a fracture, and you will see that I have something like this, which I don't really recommend to fracture by 2 when you use the Boronoid, but you definitely can. And if I want this to have like smaller pieces, you will see here that if I, with Shift Q, I reduce the amount of the explode, you will see that I'm cutting this, and if I Shift E, I will take a look at this one. So this piece I can Boronoid again with 20 and fracture again. And this piece will have its own fracture. And of course the hierarchy will get bigger and bigger. And like if you really want small pieces, let's take a look. You can select this one, for example, and you can fracture again if you want. And you can go on until you have very small pieces. Up until level 3, I wouldn't recommend going more than level 3 and have very small pieces, because we're going to use Niagara to simulate the small pieces for this one. But if you really want it, you can have it. So if I simulate this, you will see that I have like very big chunks here. Okay, and I have like the small pieces here and some medium pieces there. Now let's take a look at another node for fracturing. So before doing that, I want to have a clean state, and it will be a good idea to show you the reset button. So if I just click reset, then everything is gone. If I explode the mesh, you won't see any fracture pieces. So the cluster is very similar to the uniform boronoid actually. So this is basically grouping the boronoids. That's why it's called cluster. So if I click here, you will see I just have a different result, right? Much more complex. So I have the same settings, like to play with the amplitude and the frequency, right? And the octave number, something like that. And I can just play with those. I can also play with the point spacing. Let me draw my sights. My point spacing here. There you go. As you can see, as I increase the point spacing, I can move the points a little bit. And of course, I have the minimum cluster size and the minimum sites per cluster. So basically, all this will give you, like, example, I have 500. The radius of the cluster will be all this. So all the box becomes a cluster. This is the cluster radius. And if I go back to original, then the radius is 0, of course. So if I just want to increase the radius here, I can just go something like 90. But to be honest, if you want to use this mode, this one already have like a, compared to the uniform boronoid, this one already have a nice variation. So you have like the small pieces and the medium pieces. So I just like to leave it like that, honestly. So let's click on fracture and let's take a look at it. So as you can see, I have a lot of big pieces, but also a lot of small pieces, and they're kind of like grouped, and it's nice to see them when they destroy. You will see that I have much more variation compared to the uniform boronoid. The uniform boronoid, of course, like the name implies, is basically a uniform scale, but you know, this one actually makes some variations. So depending on the thing you want to achieve, you may want to use the cluster one. Let's take a look at the radial fracture. And in order to do this, I have a new mesh, so I will create a new collection. I will put it here. There you go. And now I will put the radial one. The radial one, it's very useful for things like glass and this kind of surface that you want it to break. So let's fracture just like this, so you can take a look at how it looks like. If I explode the mesh, you will see that it just breaks in a radial way, just like the glass will break. So let's take a look and play a little bit. And of course, if it breaks, it has more of the glass feeling, but we can increase the quality of this by playing with some properties. So let's reset this and let's go to radial. Let's click on our bone here, and here you will see that I have as custom parameters for radial boronoid. So by default, I can change the center. For example, I can change on X. I can move the center here or here if I want it. The same I can do with Y and D if I wanted to move it on Z axis. Okay, then it's the normal map, the normal direction, of course. And by default, I always like to put it on 0. And of course, there is the radius to make the hole like smaller. Like if you have like a small bullet here that is breaking, so that can work. Let's leave it by default. The angular steps, basically, you will increase the radial count, and the radial steps you will increase like how many of the inner radius there are here are being created. So you basically, by having more of this, you will have much more quality. Let's just leave it at 20. Then you have the angle offset. Change the offset of the angle, basically rotates everything. And the last one, which is my favorite, is just variability, which adds some randomness to the distribution. For example, I can put something like 5 or 50, it's a little bit too much, or yeah, 6 looks like a good number. So if I fracture this, now you will see that I have like a radial cut here, just like that. Okay, and let's take a look at the plane button. I go here, like you can see I have like smaller pieces like glass going on here, and the big ones are just chunks at the border. If I just wanted to have the big ones there, I can just go here, and then let's reset this, go to our radial, click on this one, and let's change the radial steps like 2, something like that. Okay, and the radius we can make it smaller, just like that, and then click fracture, and then you will see that I'm only breaking the middle. So if I click here, play, you will see that I have my glass breaking, and in the middle I have the small ones. Compared to the Planar fracture, of course, this one is much more specific. Now let's take a look at the planar fracture. If we go to planar here, you will be able to fracture along the plane. For example, by default my plane is here, right? So I can just fracture like this, and it will basically cut the mesh along the plane like this. It will extend to the infinite. So if I hit play, you will see that I cut my mesh in 2 parts in a very straight line. That's basically what the planar does. Okay, let's reset this. Okay, let's go to planar, and here of course you can change the number of clusters, like 2 or 3 or 4. You can have something like 5, for example, and then fracture, and you will have like your cuts here in different directions, like one goes here, one goes up, one goes horizontal, and so on. And this creates this feeling, it's like a blade, if you will. So if you play, and then you have like sharp cuts that you can use here. This can be useful, like, I don't know if you play Metal Gear Rising, but you can cut with the blade and it will do a super sharp cut. You have this kind of feeling. Usually for this kind of stuff, let's reset. The planar has another mode that you can reference an actor. So let's say you want a very specific cut. What I will do is to go to my modeling tools, and if you don't have it, go to edit, plugins, go to modeling here and enable them, and you will be able to see the modeling tools. And by the way, we have a complete tutorial on how to make the modeling tools, so I will put a link in the description so you can take a look at it if you are interested in learning how to model inside Unreal Engine 5. So let's continue. Let's create a rectangle here, just like that, and hit complete. Okay, and what I want to do is to cut my mesh like in half, just like this, or I can cut it into this direction. Notice that the cut doesn't need to go through the whole mesh. I don't need to do something like this to be very obvious. It will automatically extend it for me. So let's take a look at it. Let's go back to our fracture, go back to here, go to planar, and instead we're gonna use a reference actor. Click here, fracture here, and then put fracture. You will see that I have my rectangle here, which is the name of this mesh, and I create a new line for this. Let's create fracture. And now, if I explode it, you will see that I created a perfect line using the mesh I want. So this can be very useful if you want very specific cuts. For example, I want another one here. Let's go here, and let me select this and then fracture, and now I have like 3 pieces here and this one here. So you can cut the mesh in very specific ways just using this one. If you're using a custom mesh, of course, you have much more control. So if I hit play, this is how it looks like. My mesh is being cut into just planar surfaces, and I have 3 meshes here. Another important mode to fracture is the mesh one. So in order to do this, I need to create a mesh. So I will create a sphere here, and I will put it here, just like that. And I will move it just like this. Okay. So let's say I just want to make it very big, something like this, and I want to cut it here. So with my mesh mode, I will go to my cube, click on fracture, and then click on my root, and then go to mesh. You can see that I don't have much options. I just need the mesh here, so I will click here to pick the actor and click on this one. Once I do this, just click fracture. And you cannot see anything because this one is moving, is blocking our way. So let's move it. And you can see that I have a custom mesh here. Now, when will this be useful? Well, usually for walls or things like that, where you want them to break just with certain patterns, that can be very useful. You can imagine the kinds of situations you could have it. For example, you can have a wall like the player only needs to break through it, and you can have a specific mesh. So what if you want to detail it a little bit? Well, let's take a look at the modeling tools here very fast. Let's go here to modeling tools, and let's increase the, let's do a displace, something like this. And you will see that I have more noise here. I will change the subdivisions to something like 1. And this will increase the resolution of my mesh. I can of course play with these ones if I wanted, but let's just leave it like that for now. We're not really going into details with the modeling tools. So what I can do here is basically put it here. Let's go back to our cube and click reset, and then go to mesh, pick this one. It's already picked, so let's just click on this one and then click fracture. And let's move this one a little bit. And now you can see I have a very specific cut that I can use so that I have exactly the same silhouette that I'm having here with this one. I'm using the noise of the mesh in order to make my cut. So if I wanted to take a look at how this looks like, I can just play, and you will see that it breaks very nicely into very specific parts. Of course, this kind of fracture will have a lot of increase in the polygons, especially in the inside area, but it's very useful to increase the fidelity of the destruction and this kind of thing. For the Voronoi one, it's usually more flat. So if you want more high quality pieces, you can use the mesh actor to do the cuts for you. Okay. Another thing you can do here is select one of those and just play with another mode. For example, you can use the uniform fracture. Okay. And you can just go fracture here. And now you will have another level. In level 1, we have the original one, and in level 2, you have this one only. This one is level 2, and all levels, of course, all of this separated. So let's take a look at what happens when we play. So this one break, but this one break into several chunks. So this is for the bench mode, extremely useful if you want to detail very specific parts and have more details close up to the camera. So this one is one of the most important ones. Now let's take a look at the slice fracture. It's a very specific one. So if you click on this one and you click on this, let me just fracture this so you can take a look at what this does. Essentially, it's adding slices in X and Y and Z. In this case, the X, Y, and Z is 3, 3, 1. So let's fracture so you can take a look at what this does. If I fracture this, you will see that I have my Shift E like this, and I can Shift Q to make it. And you can have a very specific cut for this. So basically, what it's doing is cut in X 3 times, 1, 2, and 3, and in Y another time, and in Z 1 time, like this. So this could be Y and X, depending on your orientation. I believe this one should be Y, but anyway, what this does is to have a very, it has like the brick feeling, you know, like this looks like bricks that have fall down. And of course you can play with the settings here. So if we go to our fracture, let's reset this, and what I will do is to go to the slice, click on this one, and of course I can change the number of X, for example, like this. You can see the ones here are changing. I can change, like, I don't know, 5 on Y, and I can change the randomness of these ones, just like this. Okay, and we can offset the variation, and we can basically rotate them into different directions. If I rotate them a little bit, I will have something a little bit tilted, not perfectly square. So when I play the game, you can see that I have this kind of result. Okay, you can see how all these different fracture modes will greatly change the quality of the simulation. Depending on how you cut your mesh, it will change how it looks like. So the fracture mode is extremely important, and it's the first step when you do your destruction. Now let's take a look at the brick fracture. So if I click on brick, you will see that I have my brick here. I just click on this one, and let me click fracture so you can take a look at what this does. It will basically create the bricks here. Very useful if you want to create like a brick wall or something like that. Personally, I find that the slide mode works better for me to have the brick feeling compared to this one, but let's just take a look just in case. So let's reset this and let's go to the brick, and here you have some properties like the change the bond, something like that, like different types of bricks, and you can change like the length of the bricks. For example, if I make them everything smaller, divided by 4, you will have smaller bricks. So if I fracture this just like this, let me put the point spacing to 0.1, fracture, you will see that I have more bricks here. Wait a little bit. And there you go. It took a while because it's a lot of pieces. So let's take a look at when you play. And basically the point spacing will make it like more high quality, let's say. But of course you can see how the brick is working here. Like you have all your bricks here, and it's working really nicely. Okay, and of course this part could be removed potentially. All this is the bricks, and this one is something, you know what, this is why I prefer the slice one. It's much faster, and but you know, the brick comes with a lot of options too. Now let's take a look at the cluster options here, and this one personally I just use some of those, so let's take a look at some of these clusters. I have two levels of clustering here, level 2, level 1, and of course level 0 only has the root. So let's just say I want to uncluster this or level up. For example, I have this piece here, or maybe all these pieces that I have here, and I just want it to be in another level, so I can just put level up, and now this will be part of the level 1 hierarchy. I can do the same with this, like this, and I can level up, and now I will only have like one level. Let me fracture a little bit more. Let me find the contact ones. Go, and then go to fracture. Okay, now I have another one here. And what I can do is uncluster, just like this. I can uncluster this, and remove parent cluster and move up to another level. And with this, I remove my original clustering that I had, and now it's in the same level. Why you want to have different levels? Although the pieces are the same, you can see that here is more cluster. It's because sometimes you want certain forces to destroy the big chunks first, but not the smaller ones, and you want to have different damage thresholds to have control over which pieces you want to destroy first and which pieces you want to destroy later. So this one is a cluster menu, basically. It's very straightforward. I will leave you to play with this, but basically is to organize the clusters a little bit. Okay, and of course you have the magnet and the auto cluster, something like this. You will do the auto cluster for these ones, and it will take a while, but you know, basically it will do the clustering for you if you don't really want to think much. But you know, this is another option, you know, the magnet and you know the cluster are other ways to use the fracture here. You can of course use the selection and the siblings and do another uniform boronoid or a cluster one or any other kind of fracture you want. So with this you have a little bit more control. So just wanted to touch this one a little bit before moving on to more important parts. So now that we took a look at the basics of how we can fracture our mesh, let's take a look at other stuff to make our mesh simulate better. Now, all of this is to define how you would like to cut your mesh, which is very important. But there are other options you can do to make your simulation look better. So, to start, I will cut this mesh using the uniform boronoid. By my default settings, I will just click fracture. Okay, and now I will choose another level, such as this one maybe, using control. I will make, or maybe just the ones on top, something like this. I will make it a little bit smaller, just like that. So if I can take a look at the fracture, you will see that I have some smaller pieces here and the big chunks here. So let's take a look at what happens when I simulate my mesh. Hit play. It doesn't exactly look very pretty, right? The chunks are there, and I have the small ones and the big ones, which I think it's very nice. But we need to play with some properties in order to make this one better. Okay, so if you take a look at our asset, you will see that I have some elements here, of course, but I have a res collection here in my chaos physics. If I open this one, you will see that I have a bunch of properties. Oh, and by the way, if you don't see the details, make sure you click on Windows and click on Details. Sometimes it's easy to have the window like this and you don't see them and you panic. So don't worry, just click on this one in Asset Editor, go to Details, and it's fine. So basically, this one has the options that applies the physics simulation, how you want your pieces to behave. Okay, so the collision type can either be implicit or biparticle implicit. So we will take a look at those later, but the one I want you to take a look at is the implicit type. Basically, each mesh has a collision. If I hit play, you will see that the reason why this one doesn't work, it's because I'm having some issues with this. So what I will do is to change the implicit type to level set instead of box. So now I hit play, you will see that my collision is much better. And the reason is my collision is being much more let's remove this one. My collision now has much more accurate results. It's basically having an envelope for these ones, and of course you have much better results. Another thing you can do to increase the quality of your simulation is to play with the mass. For example, I have here the option to check mass as density. By default, let's simulate this, my mesh will break, but it doesn't have any mass to it. So what I can do, I will click escape, go to my properties. If you don't have this window, remember, go to res collection and you will have it here. You can press mass as density. Once you click it, click save, and now click simulate again. And now this works much better. Let's click escape again, and now what I want to do is to change this mass to something like 2000 something. Save it, simulate, and now this kind of mass can work much better with kind of asset. Basically, it feels heavy, especially if we put it like here. You will feel like it's destroying much more naturally here. Now let's take a look at the damage threshold. By default, I have 250 here, and let me open my geometry collection and change my explicit to level set and use mass something like 2000. Okay, this will allow me to have my simulation much more realistic. Let's click simulate, and now you have, like, I have my mesh here, it's simulating. So I will make this one down, and what I will do is, if you check the properties here and you also have this here in the damage threshold, of course these properties will change per instance. So what you can do is to have different damage threshold to destroy the mesh. For example, I can increase this to 10 million, something like this, like a crazy number, and now my mesh won't destroy. So depending on how much force I have, I will have some destruction here. So first is like 250, and if I want to, let's say, not destroy this one, let's put a crazy number again, put something like this, and now we have only like big pieces here. And if you don't want to destroy this one, maybe something like this. So basically what you're doing is increasing the resistance that your mesh has. And of course, if you go higher, go something like this, depending on the velocity this one has, it will have different damage threshold. So for this type of stuff, it's just better to play with the settings, have something like this, and put something like 250 and 150, and if you hit play, see that have your instructions simulating. Of course, you can remove this. You don't really need to apply those. For example, I can delete this, click or here, delete and delete, and I will only have the damage threshold for the first one. And you can see it appears to be lighter, and the reason is I'm not really checking any other levels. So how basically this works is basically I have my levels here, and I have other clusters, and I have other clusters. Just like this, and this will be my level 0, 1, and 2. And I'm deciding, so the minimum strength to break this one is 250. The minimum strength to break this one is like 100. Or if I want like the small ones, I can just put like this, because you need like a lot of strength to remove the small ones. I can try to do that just like this. I can apply some of those like this, and I can just put something crazy. Let's just hit play, and basically you will have different results. And for this kind of stuff, it's just better to play with it. For example, here I'm not breaking the level 1. Basically, different damage threshold will give you different results, so it's better to play with those. Of course, you can play with the damage threshold here. Like, for example, you can add them here, or you can have like 100 and then 50 to break the small ones, and then maybe this one is like 25,000. Okay, and for me, I will just use the default value, and I can use damage threshold cluster for all different levels. Will actually like unify everything, but for me right now I'm just this one. Okay, so this is the damage threshold. Is very important actually, and with this I think we're ready to go to the fields node. Of course, we have more options here, but as we continue to progress through the course, we will touch little by little these options. One of the things that I want to cover before going on to other fun topics, it's the creation of UVs. So by default, if we use a Planar Fracture here, click on Fracture, and we try to explode our mesh, you will see that my UVs are like kind of broken. They don't do the UVs automatically. So what you need to do is to make the UVs. And in order to visualize this better, I will put a material from Megascans that I have. Let's just say maybe this one, and put it here in the second one. Okay, and let's wait it until compiles. So basically, what we will do here, it's go down here to the auto UV. Okay, and we can do that very easy. We can use auto UV, but before, let's wait for the shaders. It's about to finish. Just 90%. There you go. Okay, so let's try to check the UVs. Okay, if we hit play, you will see that I have some UVs, and looks like automatically it will have some. And the good thing is that you can change the inside area of your destruction. But if you don't like these UVs, you can totally go to here to auto UV, and you can change the resolution. I will leave it at 512. Okay, and then click auto UV, save it here in its folder. Okay, and then here you have your UV texture that you will use. And let's take a look at the explode amount. Okay, so now this one has the UVs aligned for each face. And now when you break it, of course, it's nice to see the inside. It gives a lot of detail. All right, so that's it for the UVs. Remember, you can make them. By default, looks like they will use simple UVs at the beginning, but just in case if your UVs are wrong or you want to change them, remember you can do this inside of Unreal. So before we continue, I want you to show what you can get with the Chaos Destruction demo. Unfortunately, it's been updated a lot and I haven't been able to open the project, but what is inside here is the field system. The field system allows us to create different blueprints that will trigger destruction, and that's great. So if you cannot open this, and a lot of people have trouble compiling the Chaos demo and has a lot of issues, I will just show you an alternative. You can just go to the project here, go to the content, and just copy the blueprints and materials, and then just paste them in your project. All right. So once I do that, I will have something like this. Okay. But before doing that, go to plugins and go to fields. Go to field and go to field system and click enable. So the field system, it's a plugin that will enable you to use field functions in blueprints, and the field functions will allow you to add forces to destroy your mesh on runtime. All right, so inside of here you will have this folder. It's you have a lot of blueprints here. We will go little by little to show you what each one of those do. And of course you have the materials, because you don't want to kill the dependencies, and the materials are very nice. So in the next parts, I will show you how to use these fields, and I will show you which ones are the most important ones. Okay, so let's start with the first field, that is the anchor field. The anchor, or I don't know how you say this, the anchor or the anchor, it comes with a white cube, actually. So if you open this, you have a very simple viewport that has the cube that you want to use in order to specify which areas you want to anchor. I will just call it like that for now, okay? And then you can go to the construction script, and I will just explain this a little bit. You don't need to actually create this by yourself. That's the reason we import the blueprints from the Chaos demo. But basically what this is first we get the box that we're using, and we create a calling field. Okay, and in this box, anything that is touching it, this is our field node, we add a construction field, and we change the dynamic state. Okay, you don't really need to understand this if you don't want, but if you want, you can really go deep into how these fields work. Okay, so how do we use this? If I hit play, you will see that my mesh just starts falling. And I will put my mesh a little bit closer to the player, like this. Starts falling, and you know, one of the things that a lot of people are trying to do is, how do I stop my mesh from falling from the start? And you can put it at the beginning, and as you can see, it really doesn't matter, it will still fall, and that's not really what we want. So in order to fix this, we can use the anchor field. So the anchor field, I'm gonna put it on a position where I want all my parts from my destruction to not move. Okay? Just like that. And you can scale it non-uniformly if you want. The idea is that this box has a fall-off, so it can have a smooth transition. And basically, these parts are not going to move. So if I hit play, you will see that it's still falling. And the reason is we haven't specified the destruction mesh that you need to use the anchor field. So what we will do is to go to our destruction mesh, and here maybe this one is 0 for you, so you will click on initialization fields, click plus, and then use the pick actor from scene, and then click here on our anchor field. And just by doing that, we click play, and our mesh doesn't move anymore. So what this does is, no matter what force you apply, this thing will never be destroyed. So this gives us with another problem. So okay, now my mesh doesn't destroy, but now I want to destroy it, right? I need to have control over when I want to destroy it. And this is where we're gonna take a look at other force fields. Okay, so let's destroy this mesh. And we're gonna do that by using another field. This time we're going to use the cluster strain field. Okay, so you can take a look at that, just like the anchor field, and it has basically the same. It has a fall off. In this case, it's a radius, that's why we're using a sphere, and we're adding a force here, external strain. That's the force. Okay, so by default, this won't work on Unreal Engine 5, and I have been trying to figure out why, but I have a workaround for this field to work in Unreal Engine 5. This used to work perfectly in Unreal Engine 4, but in 5 I cannot manage to do this here. But if you want to enable it, we need to do a couple of things. So we will open our cluster field, and we have it here. And in the event graph, we're going to create an event, a custom event. And this event, we can call it toggle field, maybe. Okay? And then we will call this event. It's like an event, call it other event. And call function, and we call toggle. Okay? So toggle field will call toggle. Toggle will call all the rest of the nodes. Okay? So click compile. And now what we need to do is to enable this. And a good way is just to open the level blueprint. Okay? Inside my level blueprint, I can script all the events that are happening in my scene. Usually you will want this to have in a blueprint itself, but to demonstrate the fields, we're going to use the level blueprint. So the way we're going to use it is we're going to click on our mesh. Well, not our mesh, actually. We need to add this field. Sorry, we need to add this field here. Okay. And we need to specify a radius. Let's say I want to destroy the top of it. Okay. Just like that. I want to destroy the top. And you will see that here I have a force, it's a magnitude. This will make me specify how high or how low is the strength of the force, but let's play with it later. So I just want to put it here, and by default if I hit play, nothing happens, okay? And if I hit like initialization fields, I put this one, then nothing happened, okay? So let's remove this one. We only want to have our anchor field, and you click this one, and then you go to your level blueprint, and here you will reference the cluster strain field, okay? Inside of here, you will call the toggle field, which is the event we created before. And we can just put any input. For example, I would put the 2 key with my keyboard, and I will keep press. Okay? Now let's save all. And now let's play. Now nothing happens, and I will press 2. And you will see that I apply force to all my mesh. And just by using this, I'm able to have control over this. Now, these force fields are different. They have different classes and they have different properties. So we will take a look at the most important ones. For this one, I don't find much of a difference. For example, with the magnitude here, if I have a damage threshold of 250, and let's say I put 230, and I hit play, I won't be able to destroy it because my damage threshold is a minimum of 250. But if I put something like 260, use only that, and hit play, and press again, I will be able to destroy my mesh. Now, this kind of force is basically very uniform. So I will apply the same magnitude, but I don't have control over what is the strength I want to destroy my mesh. This is what we're gonna take a look at other fields. But this is the way you can destroy fields by using your keyboard or any other input. So you can press 2, and then my mesh will fall. And as you can see, my mesh that wasn't supposed to fall, it's still in place. So that's a good thing to have. So another important field is the force and strain. Compared to only the strain field, this one comes with a force parameter. So if I put it here, you will see that I have a strain magnitude and a force magnitude. The strain will determine if I'm strong enough to destroy the mesh, and the force will determine how much force I apply to destroy mesh. Essentially, if this number is higher, the pieces will go flying, and if this number is lower, they will just fall naturally. So, in order to activate this, we need to edit the blueprint, just like we did before, because this event cannot be called outside of this one. So let's just create a custom event, and we will call it toggle field, just like that. And just like before, we will put a toggle here, call function. Okay, this event called this event, and this event triggers the rest of the things. All right, so now let's go to our level blueprint, and let's put this into positions, maybe something like here, maybe like this. Okay, so in order to activate this one, we need to go to our level blueprint, and when we click this, go to our level blueprint, and then call reference, and then we will call the event we created toggle field, this one, and we will use the number 2 key. Okay, so click compile, save everything, and now if I click 2, then I destroy my mesh. Now what I can try to do is to change the force magnitude to something like 1 or 0.1, like very subtle. And if I do it, like it will have a minimal strength to destroy the mesh. Or I can go very high and let's say multiply this by 100. And now if I destroy it, the meshes will have a little bit more strength. Or I can just do something like this, very crazy. Then I destroy it. And you can see that this mesh went really far because this part is really affecting it. So let's divide this by 10. Maybe we can see it clearly. And you can see that I have the pieces that, you know, they jump like a popcorn. And, you know, you can have this parameter to control how much strength you want to apply to the field. Of course, if you want it very subtle, just put something like 10, and then you just click 2, and then it will fall like naturally. But if you're saying like you have a wizard and it's throwing a fireball, and it's like you want to have something like this maybe, and then it will feel like it has a little bit of more punch, more power, can multiply by 10 maybe, and play again, and you can see I destroy the meshes, and the part that is here, it's actually having the most amount of strength, and it will decrease with the radius until you have a smooth fall-off. So this is the force and strength blueprint, and I will put it here in my favorite fields so you can take a look later. I will share the project files with you so you can play with it on your side. Now let's take a look at the force field with Falloff. I already did our usual setup with custom event and call the event that calls the other event. And with this, let's drag it into our level. Let's take a look at what this does. So this is very similar to the last field we checked, but there is a small difference that we have as rotation multiply. And what it does is basically adds angular rotation to your mesh. So let's apply it first to see what it does. So let's open our level blueprint and let's call a reference from this and then toggle, and then call the toggle field. Then when I press 2, it will put something. I hit play, and notice that when I apply the force, it's like it's okay, it just falls. But now I can play with the rotation. For example, I can put like 15,000 or something like this, so it can be very evident. And now when I play, you will see that the meshes rotate faster. They have an angular rotation. That this means is that when I apply the force, the meshes start with a velocity, and the rotation values will also change very rapidly. For example, like this. You can see they rotate a lot, as compared to this one, where I can play with it. They don't really rotate that much. Okay, so of course you can play with the force, something like, you can put something like this, and then something like this too, and then you will have some crazy results too. If you play with the values a little bit higher, just like this, and you can see that when I play, I will take a look at this one, take a look at the top. If I explode it, the mesh that is applying the force here, the force is applying the most amount of strength to this piece. This piece is flying but also rotating compared to the last one that it wasn't rotating. Okay, so this is my force field with Falloff. Let's put it into our favorite collection. We have to take a look at the anchor one, the force and strength, and the force field with Falloff. Now let's take a look at the noise field. To be honest, it's fairly similar to the other fields we have cover already, but maybe it works showing off. So let's drag it into the map and let's try to put it like here, something like this. Okay, so once you have this, you have the strain magnitude similar to the other force field, the force magnitude, which is the strength of how the pieces will, it will determine how the pieces will fly. If it's a lot of strength, they will go really, really far. And then you have the noise scale, which doesn't really affect much, and the rotation magnitude. So it's very similar to the last one we saw. So for this one, I already create my custom event, just like this, custom event. And I'm calling this trigger actor, just by calling call trigger actor, just like this. Okay, let me delete this. Okay, compile. And now here, let's reference our noise field. I will drag it and call the toggle field. And then I just need to toggle it by pressing 2. So if I hit play, you will see that there is a small piece that starts flying like very fast. Take a look at this one. Take a look at the top. So I have some small pieces here in this chaos actor, but what I can do is to change the force to something like 10, something like this, and everything will fall kind of in the same place. That's one thing. The other thing is that you can change the rotation, something like maybe something like very high, so that pieces rotate a lot. You can have like a popcorn feeling. That's very nice actually. If you're having a stylized game or something, that definitely can help you. Or the other way around, you don't want this to rotate. This will just fall in place. Typically, this kind of result will help you with realistic surfaces that are very heavy. So keep this in mind. Things in real life that are very heavy don't rotate that much when they destroy. And of course, the strain magnitude is very self-explanatory. If we put something like 10, nothing will happen because here in our asset, our minimal damage threshold is 250. Let me delete this one. And of course, if I have a strain value of 10, nothing will happen. So for the noise field, we can put anything higher than 250, and this will work. So this is basically the noise field. You can try to play with the noise scale, like put something like 15. Really, it's just very subtle details, so you won't be able to notice them as much. It's just little tweaks you want to do. Okay, so this is the noise field. So the last one I want to show you is the random force. Let's go to drag it into the world. Let's drag the force, and it's just a strain magnitude and a force magnitude. So we're gonna do the same for this. We're gonna open the blueprint. And here in the beginning, we're just going to create our custom event. Custom event and toggle field. And then we will call this one, call trigger actor. And this will do it. So compile. And let's reference our asset. Say this one, get a little bit bigger. And let's reference our asset in the level blueprint. So right click, create reference, and then drag this, and then toggle field. Okay, now that you have this, drag the press button to this one, and we're good to go. So this one is fairly similar to the other ones, but it can have a little bit of a different result because it adds random forces. So by default, if I hit play and press 2, looks very similar to the other ones. So the strain magnitude is the same we saw. If we put like 240, then nothing will fall. Let's put it again here. Force magnitude, we can try something like 1 or 0.1, and everything will fall like on its own a car, like only like by gravity is affecting it, not much by force. But if we put something like 1 million, maybe not enough, but let's see. Let's put like multiply by 100. Remember that this mesh has 2000 kilograms. So okay, so basically it will apply forces randomly in every direction, and you know, it's just another option you have for the force fields. So just keep that in mind. I will put this on my collection here for my favorite fields. And with this, we cover all the force fields, the ones that destroy our meshes, and the anchor field, that ones that allows our mesh to just not activate at the beginning. So now we're going to take a look at some other utility blueprints, such as the disable and the sleep field, that will help us to optimize our destruction. Now let's take a look at the disable field. If I hit play and activate my destruction, you will see that my meshes are activating all the whole way, and this is making my game a little bit laggy, not very performance wise. So what we need to do is to disable them. So we're going to do that with the disable field. So we're gonna drag it here, and we're gonna put it in a place where the fields, where they fall in the ground, they will be disabled here. Something like this. Okay, so let's hit play and activate our destruction again. And now you will see that anything that is touching the green box now is disabled. I can walk on it, and my performance is much better now. I'm not simulating the destruction anymore. Look at this one. Okay, so the thing about this field is starts with a magnitude. So by default, let me put this one here so you can take a look better. Basically, anything that is very fast, it will be on the field. So let me simulate this again here. Basically, they touch the ground and they stop, and that's not very pretty. Performance wise is very nice, but that's why the magnitude property comes here. You can type something like 100, and it will wait until the magnitude it's, you know, a little bit lower. Let's just say the velocity goes down and down until it reaches something like 100, and then it will stop. Before it was like this number, was like 500,000, I think, and this means if the velocity is like 500,000 or more, then it will stop. And of course, a lot of them will stop with that. So if we put something like 100, then our pieces will just flip after a while, after they lose some momentum. Okay, so this is the disable field. I'm gonna put it here in my favorite fields, and with this, now we're gonna take a look at our sleeping field. So now let's take a look at the sleeping field. Let's move this one here so it doesn't bother, and let's go back to our content browser. Here, go to sleeping field, drag it here, and let's drag it like this. Okay, so the sleeping field works a little bit different. It doesn't really stop the simulation completely. It just like pauses. It's like they're sleeping. So if I click 2, so some of them will become like they are not really activating anything. So let's change like 15,000, 50,000. Okay. So some of them are activating a little bit. So let's move this one up so it can be a little bit more obvious. Maybe like this. Okay. Okay. So now you see that these ones are still, the simulation is in process, but they are like, you know, like the name implies, they are sleeping. So if you want to activate a game, like maybe you can do it. I don't find any way you can for now, but this is not the same as the disable field. The disable field just really disables them very easily, like this. Okay, and of course you need to drag it up like this. Okay. And now this one, the collision doesn't work. So basically that's the main difference between the sleeping field and the disable field. And let's put this one in my favorite ones. Personally, I like the disable more. But now we're ready to do some other stuff such as Niagara and, you know, the gameplay components. So let's take a look at what we can do with it. So we're going to start adding Niagara to our chaos destruction. So what we need to do is just to make sure you go to plugins, type chaos, and here you have chaos Niagara. By default it's enabled in Unreal Engine 5, but just in case if you don't have it, make sure you have this enabled and restart the editor. Okay, so I have the started content here. You can add it by add feature content pack and then click on starter content. So the starter content will come with a bunch of features, assets we can use. In my case, I want to use the particle systems. However, the particle systems don't really work with chaos because now we use Niagara. So make sure you activate the plugin Niagara, cascade to Niagara converter. Okay, this will make sure you can convert the existing particle systems into Niagara systems. So I can choose any one of those. For me, I'm just going to choose right click and convert to Niagara system. And it will take a while to convert. And there you go. We will call this my chaos explosion Niagara system. Just like that. So if you take a look at it, what you will see is that you have your explosion. And if you're new to Niagara, we will have some Niagara tutorials in our channel. Make sure you check them out too. So for now, what I want you to understand is that there is this spawn particle and this emitter update. Okay, and this will happen into all our emitters. Our emitters are a collection of systems, well, let's just say particle systems that are together we create a Niagara system. So we have the emitters, and each emitter needs to be activated by using the chaos component. So in order to do that, we need to go to the particle spawn or the particle update. First the emitter update, and let's choose chaos. And you will choose a spawn from chaos. So let's do that. And now the shockwave won't spawn. So the next one we need to take care of, it's the particle spawn. We will type chaos and apply chaos data. Okay, now we don't really need to use this anymore. This spawn burst, we don't need them because we will spawn from the chaos system. So here you will see I have my properties in my Niagara, and automatically when I add a parameter here, a new module, a spawn from chaos, and apply chaos data, you will see that I have my chaos destruction data here. My data is divided into 3 categories. Collision data, which is when my destruction collides with anything. Breaking data is when it breaks. And trailing data is the one that lives when the object is falling down and leave a trail. So for me, I just want to leave things as it is. I don't really need to change anything of this. Okay, so what I can do here is to do the same for the rest of the emitters. For example, I can click on emitter update and type chaos and uncheck spawn burst instantaneous, and then go to particle spawn and do the same here. And you need to do the same for all your modules. Okay, so I will just continue very quickly here. Emitter update chaos, spawn from chaos, and particle spawn chaos apply. Make sure you fix the dependencies just by clicking on this and fix dependencies. Okay, so let's keep doing this. Emitter update, spawn from chaos, particle spawn, apply chaos data, and here we will uncheck spawn burst. I forgot to uncheck this one too. Let's check the other one. Yeah, looks okay. Let's fix this too. Fix issue. Okay, and now this one. Let's go to emitter update, spawn from chaos. Now we want spawn by burst, and particle spawn apply chaos data. So as you can see, my particle, I cannot see anything here. So what I recommend for you is to have like a normal particle system that you will usually use, and a special particle system, or a Niagara system, I should say, for chaos, use only for chaos. Okay, so now that our particle is complete, I'm telling Niagara system that all these emitters should spawn using chaos. So now let's go to the fun part. We will create a blueprint here, and let's create something like here, like Niagara, something like that, and we will create a new blueprint. I will choose an actor, and I will call it BP, my chaos with Niagara. Okay, so I will double click this. This is my default blueprint, and by the way, if you don't know how to use blueprints, we have a complete course from beginners for free on how to use blueprints, so I will leave a link in the description. So what we need to do here is create our component for chaos. So what we will do is to create my static, not my static mesh simulation, sorry. Oh, it's my collection. Okay, collection, geometry collection. Okay, my geometry collection is the chaos asset that I created. In my case, I had my statue here that we created before, and it has some properties like the mass and the collision type and everything. We will leave it as it is. We can put particle implicit just in case, but let's go to add. Okay, let's go here. We will choose our collection, this one, and we will put it here. And now what you have here is your asset. Now let's drag it into the world to see how it looks like. We put it here, and there you go. You have your asset here. Great. Now what I want to do is spawn a Niagara, and it will be very easy. I will go to my scene root, and I will add a Niagara particle system. Okay, this will be my Niagara Chaos. Okay, and by default I need to add something, so I will go to my starter content, go to particles, and I have my Chaos Explosion Niagara. So I will just put it here. And what I want to do is to maybe put it in a place that I can see it, something like this. There's really no way to preview how it will look like because we're using the Chaos one. That's why I recommend you to use another one here, and then you can use the same position with your Chaos system. So now that we're here, you can see that we have the solver. We will take a look later, but for now this is a collision data. This will spawn by collision or by breaking or by trailing data. And just like this, we just need to do something else. We go to our geometry collection and make sure you notify breaks and you notify collisions. Otherwise, we won't be able to tell Niagara that this one is breaking. So once we do that, let's try it. Let's go here, play. And you see that my particle is spawning when my asset is breaking. And I can play with my Niagara to put it somewhere else. Looks like the pivot point is a little bit funny for this one. So for this, I can have my Niagara here. I will just put the player here so we can take a look at it easier. Hit play. Okay, let's put it here, compile. There you go. And now my system is spawning close to my object here. So this is the way you add Niagara to your chaos destruction. In essence, what you're doing is communicating these events that are happening here, the notified geometry on chaos break event and collisions. And what you're doing here is putting here in this collection, we will notify the breaks and collisions. And we will use this system. Actually, this system, you can put it anywhere in the world. I could try to put it here. I'm not sure if this should work actually, but just in case, we can play. Okay, so what I find is like it's better to create a blueprint for this. Sometimes it works with the chaos solver, but this is the one I found that works the best for me. Chaos is not entirely ready for now, but this is the way you can make it to have your Niagara system in place. And of course, you can try the breaking data. For example, this is the data source. We can try it when it breaks. Okay. Or you can try the trailing data. For example, this data. And now you will have the trail inside. It's a little bit hard to see because my asset is very big, but it's happening on the inside. Usually, you can try to have like different types of systems. One for the breaking point, and one for the collision, and one for the trails. So you can have different systems that actually work in different situations depending on what's the state of the destruction. So this is how you use Niagara in chaos. There are some times that you want to trigger the destruction by shooting an element. But, you know, if I shoot at this thing, nothing will happen actually. And with chaos, we can enable these force fields with some gameplay elements we have. So let's take a look at this. Okay. So the first thing I have is I do have my first-person shooter here. First-person blueprint that you can add by feature content pack. Here, if you already create the project in Unreal Engine 5, it won't show up the first person. So what you need to do is create a new project, and when you create a new project, you just select first person. After that, you just click right click and then migrate, and then it will migrate all the necessary files to your new project. In my case, I already have it, so let's take a look at the blueprints. Well, I have a gun, but I don't really want to do anything with the gun. So what I will do is to open the projectile here, and just here I can see I have a add physics impulse to any physics object we hit. Okay, so this will be very simple. We just need to add our force field here. How are we gonna do that? Well, let's go to the viewport, and here in our collision component, or let's say here in my first person projectile, let's add a child actor. Okay, and let's call it force chaos. And you know, we can put it as a child of the sphere, so that wherever the sphere goes, my force goes with the sphere. So now what I need to do is to add a class here. I have a bunch of classes here in my favorite fields collection. I can use any one of those, but in my case I will just use the force and strain. Okay, so I will just click this, and I can just put it here. And with this, what I have done is to put my blueprint force and strain here. Okay, and you know, now that I have this, nothing will happen because I haven't activated the force. So it's very easy. We just need to go to the event graph, and here you see we can add the physics impulse to any physics object we hit, right? So what we need to do is to grab this force chaos, okay? But first let's create a sequence here. Create sequence, okay? And the sequence tells, okay, first do this thing, and then, you know, do the next thing. So what we're gonna do is to grab this force chaos here, and we're gonna get the child actor. Get child actor. Okay. With this, we already have our component. That is this one, my force chaos. Okay. And then what I need to do is just put cast to BP, and I will call it force and strain. Okay. We will call this cast after this one. Okay. And then we just need to do the usual stuff. We just go to toggle field like this, and there you go. So one thing I need to do before testing this out is to go to my viewport and change the collision for the force chaos. I already did some adjustments. It was like 10 before. We can put something like 20 so we can test it out really fast, and also play with the projectile properties. Here we can put something like 30,000 or something like this. That could work. So it really won't be as nice as expected, but we just need to see if it works. So let's hit play. And now if I shoot, my bullets are very close to me for some reason, like they're colliding, and I don't want that. But if we want to try it, let's just jump here and destroy it like this. Alright. So with this, we already covered a lot of stuff with Niagara. We have covered everything from fracture modeling, different type of fracture, selection modes, clusters, UVs, and we have take a look at how we can activate the destruction mode with the fields here in our favorite fields. We can take a look at all these fields here and what they do, and also we try to put some Niagara, to put some explosions, and lastly we try to destroy it with the gameplay elements. So thanks a lot for watching, and remember that if you want to learn more, we have more stuff in our website where you can learn for free blueprints and also some other premium tutorials like modeling a castle and a lot of cool stuff like Unreal Marketplace packages. And if you like this video, subscribe and let us know in the comments what kind of video you would like to watch next, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.